Hey there everybody, Agent Fluffy here, and welcome to my fanfic read of Turnabouts and Muffins. Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Equestrian Turnabouts, Turnabout Muffins, Part 3, The Trial, by TheBronywiththeBowTie. So let's get started! The next morning, Applejack arrived at court once again. She had to tell Big Mac and the rest of her family her reasons for why she was taking another day off from the workload, but they understood afterward. Proving Derpy innocent was important. As she entered, she saw Pinky waving her over. She was standing next to Twilight, where they were talking to Finks and Maya. "How are things looking, Mr. Wright?" she asked. "Pretty good," Phoenix said. "I think if I present the tote bag we found to the case, that should convince the judge to have Carrot Top testify again." A small sigh of relief escaped AJ. "Whew! Well, that's good news, I reckon," she smiled. Pinky nodded enthusiastically.
"Yeah! We're gonna get to the bottom of this!"
Twilight nodded. "Yes, this is very good news indeed. I wish you the best of luck, Mr. Wright," she said. "Thank you, Princess," Phoenix said. "We're going to bring the true culprit to justice." "Good to hear," Applejack said. "Know that I'm behind you, every step of the way."
"Yup, already,"
Pinky chimed in.
"Every step."
He smiled and nodded and walked inside the defendant lobby with Maya. Derpy was sitting on the couch. She looked like she hadn't gotten any sleep. "Oh no, you poor thing," Maya said, rushing to her and putting a hoof on her shoulder. "Are you alright, Derpy?" Twilight asked. "You look—" Pinky interrupted her.
"You look like Applejack when she refuses to sleep."
AJ shot an annoyed glare at her pink friend, who didn't seem to notice.
"I'm fine,"
Derpy said.
"The other person at Ponies kept me up all night with their shouting."
A frown crossed AJ's face. "That place is really ain't for you, Derpy." "I know," Derpy sighed. "It's all right. We have all the evidence we need to find the true culprit." Pinky clapped her hooves together.
"Yeah, we do?"
She looked over at Phoenix, a confused look on her face. Phoenix chuckled. "You'll see." Applejack raised an eyebrow. "I see. Oh, out again, Mr. Edgeworth," she greeted, tipping her hat as the prosecutor approached them once again. "Good morning, Miss Pye." "Right, Faye. And I'm sorry, miss, but I don't believe I caught your name yesterday in all that excitement." Applejack smiled. "Name's Applejack. No, I also go by AJ." Edgeworth raised an eyebrow at this. "Ah, well, charmed. So, did you get my letter?" Phoenix asked his rival. Edgeworth then looked to them. "I, of course, have spoken to my client, and there are certain parts of the story that makes him uneasy, as you saw yesterday, but I suspect there to be more than simple framing. It's never quite this simple, as you know, right? Every source I've asked in town cites him as a relatively nice fellow who seems to have only the best in mind for his company. Such a move would mean bad news for his company, should he be found out, even if Miss Hoops did cause a problem with one of its deliveries. I was also told that he frequently gets certain products from another business here in Ponyville called Sweet Apple Acres, and you, Miss Applejack, I presume, are the proprietor of this business?" Applejack nodded. "Yep, I run him with my family." He nodded. "Intriguing. What does that have to do with this?" Phoenix asked, intrigued. Edgeworth adjusted his cravat slightly. "I was told that the owners of it, the Apple family, have had many business deals with Mr. Rich and his family for years, and could testify how nice he was. Although I was continually told the opposite of his daughter," he said with the last part slightly exasperated. The farm mayor nodded. "Yup, he's practically a family friend, to be honest. One could argue just dispensing of pleasantries. I think my granny, and I've seen enough of him over the years to see that he ain't too bad a fella. And I don't believe he would do all this on his own choice," she explained adamantly. Edgeworth listened intently. "I see. Thank you." He then turned back to Phoenix. "Do whatever you deem necessary, right? But I truly do not believe either my or your client is guilty. and where there is currently no proof, I believe if pushed far enough, Mr. Rich might reveal a sign as to what's truly going on here. After all, our goal is to find the truth, is it not? Phoenix nodded. Right. Just leave it to me. Edgeworth smiled slightly at this. Always know I can. Phoenix, he claimed before turning to talk to his lobby. Phoenix's eyes widened at the remark. Did he just call you Phoenix? Maya asked. Pinky, AJ, and Twilight all turned to him. Isn't that normal for him? Alicorn Princess asked. No, it's not, Phoenix said.
But did he call you that yesterday, Phoebe?
Pinky asked, slightly confused. AJ raised an eyebrow. Why does it matter? Pinky smiled and nonchalantly said, 'Cause it's a sign of trust. Phoenix just nodded, then turned to the courtroom. We should get inside. Court could be reconvened soon. The all three nodded as they began to head toward the gallery to watch. Right. Hope all goes well, Applejack claimed, Pinky waving to them. Show 'em who's on this and who's a big fat liar pants, she said. Phoenix, Derpy, and Maya took their places behind the defense desk, while every pony gallery rose with the judge as he entered. Jane banged his gavel on his desk. You may be seated, he said. Court is now back in session for the trial of Mr. Behooves. Pinky, Applejack, and Twilight sat beside each other in the gallery as the judge began court. Edgeworth has already taken his place in the prosecutor's bench. He stayed silent as he waited the judge to continue. Now, would the prosecution remind the court where we left off yesterday? The judge asked. Edgeworth nodded. Yes, Your Honor. In yesterday's hearing, my client, Mr. Rich, accused Miss Hooves of destroying a large order of muffins he had ordered from Shirkue Corner. Her roommate, Miss Harvest, testified as to how the defendant would be guilty. Until her work at the bakery, Miss Pye testified that while she was not there, her employers were. And so, that is exactly who I would like to call this stand today. Recapped yesterday's events. The judge nodded. Very well then, will Mr. and Mrs. Cake please come to the stand? At this, the couple were sent to the stand on their backs. They held the twins, but then placed them in front of Hooves as they took the stand. Mr. Cake was tall and lanky, a short red mane visible from underneath the small catering hat he wore. He held his daughter, Pumpkin Cake, in his shoes, while his more stout wife held their son, Pound Cake. Will the witness please state their names and occupations? Edgeworth asked. Coffee Cake, baker and owner of Shirkue Corner, Mr. Cake stated as he gently rocked his sleeping daughter. Cupcake, baker and co-owner of the Shirkue Corner, Mrs. Cake stated, nearly mimicking her husband's statement and actions. Phoenix watched them closely while Edgeworth nodded slightly. I see then. And you were at the store the day of and around the time of the crime? Miss Cake nodded. Yes, we were both taking care of the store while giving Pinky the day off. Edgeworth nodded slightly. I see then. Please give your testimony. Right, Mr. Cake claimed, before frowning slightly. As you know, we have two separate parts, mine and my wife's. Would it be okay if we split it? Edgeworth turned to the judge. I see no problem with this, Your Honor. I don't see a problem with it either, the judge said. Please proceed with your testimony. Edgeworth nodded. Very well, it is my understanding that you took shifts, hence why two testimonies. Let us start with who was out first, Mrs. Cake. The mayor nodded. Of course. Witness testimony. Mrs. Cake began. It was a bit after we gave Pinky the day off, as per Mr. Rich's request, that our first customer of the day arrived, Derpy. I was at the front at the time, while my husband was in the back taking care of the twins. She placed an order for a large supply of muffins and paid the fee. However, it was as she was leaving I heard the twins crying, and went to the back to help my husband with the twins. The judge nodded. I see. Is that all? The judge asked. Mrs. Cake nodded. From what I saw. Should I testify next? Mr. Cake asked. Or should the defense carry out a cross-examination first, Your Honor? It might be easier to keep track going one testimony at a time, Edward pointed out. All right, the judge said. Mr. Wright, are you all right with cross-examining Mr. Cake's testimony before hearing Mr. Cake's? Phoenix nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Very well then, Mrs. Cake, Edward asked. Of course, dear, Mrs. Cake responded.
It was a bit after we gave Pinky the day off, as per Mr. Richards' request, that our first customer of the day arrived. Derpy.
Hold it! You sure Derpy was the first one who arrived? He asked, putting the hoof to chin in thought. Mrs. Cake nodded.
Yes, it wasn't long before the crime either.
So you were there when the robbery happened? Phoenix asked.
Well, in a way, I was in the back area. I didn't know anything that happened until it was too late,
Mrs. Cake said in a matter-of-fact sort of way. She seems to be telling the truth, Phoenix said to himself in thought. But I'm not too sure. You're sure you didn't see anything? He asked.
Yes, and the last thing I saw was Derpy turning to leave the store, she answered.
Phoenix nodded. All right then, please continue, he said.
She placed an order for a large supply of muffins and paid the fee.
Phoenix saw nothing wrong with that statement and nodded, signaling to her to keep going.
However, it was as she was leaving that I heard the twins crying, and I had to go back to help my husband with the twins.
Hold it! Did you hear anything from the front when you were back with your children? Phoenix asked.
Only the door opening and closing. After that, only then crying. They get rather loud, Mrs. Cake answered.
All right then, Phoenix said, a little irritated he didn't get any worthwhile information out of the baker. No more questions for Mrs. Cake. Edgeworth nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Cake. Now, Mr. Cake, please testify. Mr. Cake then stepped forward as his wife took a step back. Of course. Witness testimony. I was in the back with the kids for a good part of the morning while my wife was out front of the store floor. However, when the twins started crying, we switched places. It's a bit of a walk from our house area and in front due to the hallway that separates the two parts. My wife has told me about Derpy's visit so we can get started on our order. When I got to the front, I saw the door closing, but no pony in the store. I thought maybe Derpy had decided to stick around for a bit, and then later we discovered the scene of the crime. I see, the judge said. Mr. Wright, you may cross-examine the witness. I was in the back with the kids for a good part of the morning while my wife was out in front of the store floor. Phoenix nodded for him to continue. However, when the twins started crying, we switched places. Keep going, Phoenix said, finding nothing wrong with his statement. It's a bit of a walk from our house area in the front due to the hallway that separates the two parts. Hold it! Is it really possible for babies to cry that loudly? Phoenix asked. Both the couple looked at each other. It's best to take our word for it, Mr. Cake answered. Edward then slammed his hoof on the table. I apologize, Mr. Wright, but they are at their parent. They didn't finish and the sound of his hoof slamming down woke the twins. It took them a moment, but the chord didn't fill with two loud simultaneous cries. Their parents tried desperately to shush them. Pinky, meanwhile, stood up and bounced out of the gallery, much to Applejack's confusion. Phoenix blushed and looked around nervously, knowing the judge would blame him for making the twins cry. Edward stared blankly as the twins continued. When Pinky bounded back with a bag of flowers, she stood in front of them and dumping it upon herself, causing them to stop and laugh instead. She wiped her brows slightly and she looked at the judge.
Sorry for the mess, Your Honor. It just this works every time.
The judge just stared at the flower-covered mirror, wide-eyed. Very well then. Taking a bounce out of the court once again to clean himself up. The twins falling back asleep. Does that answer your question, Mr. Wright? Edward asked, trying to get the court back on track. Yes, it does. Please, continue, Mr. Cake, Phoenix stammered. My wife has told me about Derpy's visit so we can get started on our order. Please continue, Phoenix said. When I got to the front, I saw the door closing, but no pony in the store. Objection! You said that Derpy was the only pony you saw, correct? Mr. Cake shook his head slightly. I didn't actually see her. My wife was out front when she was there. I only saw the door closing. Well, I can prove there is more than one pony there. And I can prove who the real thief was, he says. He laid Carrot Top's tote bag out of the defense desk. This was left at the scene of the crime. This made the court uproar and chatter. The judge banged his gavel to make him stop. Order! Order in the court! What? Both the case gasped when he saw it. Miss Harvest? Did either of you see her at the bakery that day? Be honest. Edgewood looked to them. Mr. Cake then answered. We did, but it wasn't until a few hours later when she arrived to place an order. Mrs. Cake then responded with, we didn't mention her because it seemed like she had nothing to do with the events. Carrot Top's eyes widened. She knew she had been found out. Oh no! Derpy gasped. Carrot Top! Why? Edgeworth looked to her sternly. Can't you explain, Miss Harvest? Carrot Top fell apart, tears streaming down her face. Okay, I didn't! I didn't want to! I was desperate! Desperate! My carrot bar was going under bonds and Mr. Rich offered me the money I needed to steal the muffins and frame Derpy! I'm so sorry, and you never speak to me again, Derpy. I won't blame you! Maya's eyes widened. Nick, did you hear that? She exclaimed. Phoenix nodded with a smirk on his face. Yeah, I knew Rich was involved with it somehow. Edgeworth raised an eyebrow and now turned to rather freaked out Filthy. Well, Mr. Rich, any comments? Rich looked down. Oh, okay, it's true. I paid her to do it. But you gotta believe me when I say I didn't want to. Well, I think now I know where we stand, Jen said. I rule that the court shall call Mr. Filthy Rich to the stand so he can explain himself. Edgeworth nodded. Of course, Mr. Rich. Filthy then walked to the stand, and a couple leaving with their children. Mr. Rich looked down and rather depressed and stood there, not saying anything. Well? Edgeworth asked in anticipation. Well, I can't do it! Say anything would mean the end of the barnyard bargains! You gotta believe me! Edgeworth sighed and pounded his desk again. Sir! Not saying anything would mean the end of your company! At least with you at its helm. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Rich, you do not testify at once, you will be held in contempt of court. Rich sighed as he adjusted his tie. All right. Witness testimony. I stopped the crime. Miss Harvest was hired on since she was so close to the one we were supposed to pin it on. Miss Hooves, due to her messing up one of the company's orders once, it costed us a lot of money. However, you gotta believe me when I say I wanted no part in this. I was forced to do it by higher-ups. The judge nodded his head. I see, Mr. Wright. Please cross-examine the witness. Yes, Your Honor, Winks responded. I set up the crime. Hold it! Why did you set up the crime? Phoenix asked as he slid his tooth on the desk. Why make an innocent mare betray her best friend? He pointed at Rich with his left tooth. Rich frowned and looked down. I didn't want to do any of this. I was getting to why I set it up, but no pony forced Miss Harvest to do anything. She took the job, he pointed out. Phoenix nodded. Alright, keep going. Miss Harvest was hired on since it was so close to the one we were supposed to pin it on. Please continue, Phoenix said. Miss Hooves, due to messing up one of the company's orders once, it costed us a lot of money. Hold it! That sounds like the perfect moment to frame Derpy, Phoenix shouted. How do we know if these higher-ups you're talking about just aren't alive? Filthy frowned. I know it sounds suspicious since I'm the CEO, but due to some foolish decisions, I'm not fully in control anymore. He seems to be on the verge of losing it. Objection! Edgeworth intervened. So you are saying that you're more of a puppet at the moment? He looked down. I suppose you want to put it that way. Phoenix slid his desk, wanting the truth. Who are these higher-ups? He demanded. Rich looked down, on the verge of tears. I can't say. They'll have my hand if I say anything. Objection! This is a double-edged sword you're dealing with, Rich, Phoenix shouted. You tell us and your higher-ups will be upset. You don't tell us and you'll be held in contempt of court. Now, who made you do this? Rich shivered a bit. I fell on the floor unconscious. Edgeworth frowned. Well, these events have become very interesting, he said simply. Biggs wiped the sweat from his brow and sighed, irritated. Great! Now we're right back where we started. Mine nudged him a bit. Gee, Nick, maybe you pushed it too hard? Edward sighed as he waved over a couple of guards. Pick up Miss Rich. Your Honor, I suggest we send him to detention for the moment. The judge nodded. I agree. I also rule the court take a short recess while the witness recuperates and being the scalpel. Court will reconvene in 10 minutes. For now, we are adjourned. Edwards nodded and began to step out of the court. AJ was on her way out, and Pinky came back.
Oh, it's over already?
She pouted. Ty put a hoof on her pink friend's shoulder and shook her head. Not yet. We still need to find out who made Rich hire Carrot Top to frame Derpy. AJ nodded. Right. Question is, how? Why don't we just go to Barnyard Bargains building and investigate there? Mike asked. Twilight nodded. That does sound like a good plan. This session was quite a surprise. I did not expect it to go the way it did, claimed a familiar voice. Hi, Edgy! Pinky grinned. Edgeworth cringed. Please, Miss Pie. Edgeworth. Phoenix nodded. Yeah, I knew something was fishy when we found the tote bag at the scene. I feel kind of bad for making these fools cry, though. Edgeworth chuckled slightly. Yeah, that was an interesting event. Pinky seemed almost uncharacteristically serious, however. Try forward-sitting them. They're a huge hassle, but worth it. Like one time? Itchy did cut her off. Focus, Pinky. Pinky giggled a bit. Right, sorry. All right, to Barnyard Bargains. We only have 10 minutes, though, so we have to be fast, Phoenix exclaimed. Edge frowned a bit. Are you sure you're going to have enough time at the moment? Applejack nodded. He's right. It's a bit of a trek to the business building despite it being about 3 blocks away from here. Phoenix frowned at that. Filthy would probably faint again if I tried to press the information out of him. It's our only option. Edward shook his head. The stress is causing you to not think clearly, right? If one of us isn't there in 10 minutes, then the case would have already been lost. But the main matter is that we must be in the court in about 8 minutes. However, that doesn't mean they have to be. He gestured toward the 4 mirrors. Perhaps your friend Maya can lead an investigation with Miss Pie or Miss Applejack? I can stall us for time. That is, if the judge doesn't truly believe Filthy by having Miss Applejack testify still. Though it is unlikely he will go for it at this point. He said, slightly frustrated at their choices at the moment. Applejack nodded. He does have a point. Pinky nodded. Hey, yeah! We can go and see if we can't find the higher-ups! He said excitedly, still not seeming to understand what was at stake. All right, sure, he said. He looked at the excitable assistant. Maya, lead the investigation. Make sure you don't leave until you find a crucial evidence. You got it, Nick, she said with a wink. Pinky grinned. All right, investigating bikes, she said, exclaiming, bowing toward Maya. Applejack looked to Ryan Edgeworth. Should I join them, or should I stay here? Edgeworth frowned slightly. I am not sure. I feel that you would do well in keeping them on track. However, I also feel you might be able to help us stall for time here. What do you think, Wright? He asked, turning to him. Phoenix Wright said in thought. I can stall the court on my own. AJ should make sure they stay on task. Applejack nodded. Right, we try to be quick, though I ain't too sure how long this will take us. Edgeworth nodded. There's still an available day for the trial. However, we need something so the judge doesn't rule a guilty verdict today. We'll do the best we can, but I suggest you try and find some sort of evidence quickly. Phoenix nodded. Yeah, began. Edgeworth, you've never been in this sort of situation before, because mainly because you forced me into it a lot of times, so follow my lead when it comes to bluffing. Edward smiled a bit at that. That is true. This is quite an interesting situation we are in, right? Phoenix nodded, chuckling a bit. Yeah. Well, I suppose it's about time for us to go back in. Good luck to us both, right? Edward exclaimed, beginning to head back to his area. Phoenix nodded and walked back inside the courtroom, leaving the 4 mayors outside. To be continued. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. Oh boy, it's going to get interesting. Part 4 finale. So stay tuned. This has been Agent Fluffy, and I'll see you guys next time. It was quite a surprise. I did not expect it to go the way it did. Playing a familiar voice. Hi, Edgy! Pinky grinned. Edgeworth grinned. Please, Miss Pie. Edgeworth. Phoenix nodded. Yeah, I knew something was fishy when we found the tote bag at the scene. I feel kind of bad for making these fools cry, though. Edgeworth chuckled slightly. Yeah, that was an interesting event. Piggy seemed almost uncharacteristically serious, however. Try bullet-sitting them. They're a huge hassle, but worth it. Like one time? Itchy did cut her off. Focus, Pinky. Pinky giggled a bit. Right, sorry. All right, to barnyard bargains. We only have 10 minutes, though, so we have to be fast, Phoenix exclaimed. Edge round a bit. Are you sure you're going to have enough time at the moment? Applejack nodded. He's right. It's a bit of a trek to the business building despite it being about 3 blocks away from here. Phoenix rounded that. Filthy would probably faint again if I tried to press the information out of him. It's our only option. Edward shook his head. The stress is causing you to not think clearly, right? If one of us isn't there in 10 minutes, then the case would have already been lost. But the main matter is that we must be in the court in about 8 minutes. However, that doesn't mean they have to be. He gestured toward the 4 mayors. Perhaps your friend Maya can lead an investigation with Miss Pie or Miss Applejack. I can stall less for time. That is, if the judge doesn't truly believe Filthy by having Miss Applejack testify still. Though it is unlikely he will go for it at this point. He said, slightly frustrated at their choices at the moment. Applejack nodded. He does have a point. Pinky nodded. Hey, yeah! We can go and see if we can't find the higher-ups! Pinky said excitedly, still not seeming to understand what was at stake. All right, sure, Pinky said. He looked at the excitable assistant. Maya, lead the investigation. Make sure you don't leave until you find the crucial evidence. You got it, Nick, she said with a wink. Pinky grinned. All right, investigating buddies, she said, exclaiming, bowing toward Maya. Applejack looked to Ray and Edgeworth. Should I join them, or should I stay here? Edgeworth frowned slightly. I am not sure. I feel that you would do well in keeping them on track. However, I also feel you might be able to help us stall for time here. What do you think?